Hi, my name is Carrie Meikle. I have a question in regards to education. So you seem to point to education as one of the key problems, shall we say, in the economic differences. And you seem to put a college degree down, so either no college degree or those who have it. Do you feel that even within those who have college degrees, there is a strata, like a different strata? So someone who goes to a public university versus an Ivy League or private institution, there's even a difference among that? And how do you overcome that? How do you have a UMass Lowell, which I think is an anomaly in public institutions, that their average is probably comparable to a private college?
Well, first I would read David Brooks's book.
Yeah.
Have you guys read that? On how great public universities are versus the private universities have kind of gotten in the glow, but there's a lot to be said for public universities. I think that's always going to be an issue. That's less of my concern. My concern, and maybe I didn't make it clear, is what do we do about the population who isn't going to get a 4-year college degree and shouldn't necessarily get a college degree? And community colleges, I know you have a great one here. I think this should be a model. And there are companies partnering with community colleges, but they've basically been known as a wasteland. There's very, very little guidance given to careers. There's the graduation rates are really low, and people go there for years and don't necessarily graduate. And there isn't enough direction given in community colleges for jobs that will be available. But at community colleges, I also think companies need to step up to the plate more. So there was a time when unions trained people to do jobs. Well, unions, as we know, are at a low. Companies need to step up and provide apprenticeship training and more training to people. They need to partner with community colleges. I think I say this to Fortune CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs all the time, Fortune 1000 CEOs. They need to step up to the plate more and address that population. I'm just less worried about the college educated.
So are you advocating more vocational and technical schools?
Yes.
Okay.
But the kind that companies actually need, and that they will need in 5 years, given the pace that given how fast things are changing.
Do you think corporate America should then get into education and career training?
Yeah, they are, and some of them are. Yes,
right, but
absolutely.
as
absolutely.
a major
Yes.
player, as opposed to some having some programs
Absolutely.
and not many available.
Yeah. We've started at Fortune. I'm sorry to keep hyping Fortune, but we have something called the CEO Initiative at Fortune, and we bring in CEOs. We took them to visit the Pope last year after having these breakout sessions with just CEOs in the room, no handlers, to describe what they would do to create a more inclusive economy, and education was a big part of that. So there are a lot of CEOs talking about this. I will say I think they're Pollyanna about the impact of AI and automation and all that. I don't think that I think they're being a little pie in the sky about it. Yes.
Yes. You mentioned the knowledge economy a number of times. Could you please define what that is? And another comment or question that I have is some economists say that the current generation will be worse off than our predecessors, and maybe we should get used to that fact so that there isn't the angst that's around getting a bigger house, more and bigger cars, and things like that.
The new normal. That's
pardon?
The new normal argument.
The new, yeah, if you want to, call it that. And in the beginning, you mentioned the dysfunction of the past political people. Is it analogous with the present dysfunction?
I'm sorry, say it again.
The dysfunction, you mentioned the dysfunction in the past is analogous to the dysfunction that's happening now in the political structure. But we came out of the problems in the past. Is there anything in the past that would indicate how we could come out, or how we will come out of the present political dysfunction?
Okay, I'll go backwards here. Dysfunction. I think we need strong leaders to get past that. I think probably the Republican Party is going to have to go through a civil war, which it's in right now, anyways. You saw what happened this week with Bob Corker and Jeff Flake. I think you're going to see more and more voices that want progress coming out in the open and saying that, and there'll be a divide in the Republican Party before it can move forward. In terms of our kids having bad jobs, something like half of upcoming jobs are going to be part of the gig economy, meaning, you don't work for a company that provides your benefits. It's like, you are kind of on your own, and I think that's a real concern. I think that's an important way to think about healthcare and so forth as we're moving forward, because not everybody's going to be working for a big company that has those kind of benefits. I don't think young people are going to have bad jobs just as much as they're going to have many jobs and many kinds of jobs and jobs that we've never imagined. So I think that's a more positive spin on that. And what is the knowledge economy? It's the rise of anything. It's the internet. Anything related to the internet and knowledge and anything when you're not working with your hands. I mean you need training and education to function simply. Yes, way back. Well, I would.
Nina, you might want to repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'll repeat it. So, is there a book that you recommend people read in order to be more articulate in talking about these issues? I would highly. This isn't a book, but this week's New Yorker cover story. It's a robot on the cover. It's really smart on all of the displacement of workers. I'd highly recommend that because it quotes. One of my favorite economists at MIT, David O'Toole, who's doing some work on this. So I would recommend that. I would just also really recommend Hillbilly Elegy. It's a great read. Oh, you've read it? Yeah, it's a great read, and I think it just gives you such a human feeling for what's going on. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ray Hardy. I am a retired professor at the University of Mass Lowell, and I've taught probably well over, I don't know how many thousands of students. I started in '55, but so you get an idea how long that's been. One thing I've observed, there are a number of students, a small number, that shouldn't be there. There. They should go follow a vocational track, maybe. In your talk today, you talked about college, but I think you should also mention vocational training. Yeah. You talk to any owner of a plumbing business or electrical business, they're sure to help, And these folks can make a pretty good wage. Have you ever hired a plumber in to do some work? And what it costs?
Well, there's welders making $100,000 a year in Texas.
But I guess what I'm saying is, there's other tracks, you get a mindset, college, and there are other avenues that some of these folks should pursue. That's one thing. Now, I don't want to, maybe you don't want to digress a bit. I just wanted to question you about the GE dilemma that they've gone through. Where was the board when things began to slip? And I don't know whether you want to address that here or not, but if you could, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm not really.
You don't.
I know they've slipped, but I don't know. I don't have any insight on that. I'm sorry. But your point about creating a track that's not necessarily a four-year college is exactly right. I think that's right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Howard Hall. I'm going to second that. There's a book that was printed in 1996, I think it was, called The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
Statistically, it doesn't apply today, but the idea is that everybody next door, here's this millionaire, he runs a plumbing business. He wants his kids to be doctors and lawyers and make less money than he makes being a plumber.
Right.
The other thing I would say about education, I agree that there's a great place for plumbers. I have a grandson who's learning construction management at a junior high school, a good junior college. I fully support that. I think it's a great idea. Not everybody wants to go to college. But I think if you go to college, you ought to learn how to learn. Mm-hmm. Because as you correctly point out, over the next, I've been working for 60 years. As you point out, over the next 60 years, these people will probably work in 4, 5, or 6 different areas. And if they don't learn how to learn, they can't function there. So I tell my grandchildren, get a good liberal arts education.
Right.
And you'll learn how to learn, and then you can deal with anything. Thank you.
It's a life learning script, and there's companies talking about that and how they're making, I know this company Accenture, which is 400,000 people around the world. I work closely with them, and that they're trying intentionally to provide that for their workers, is that lifelong learning script. You're always going to change. It's change, and the change is fast, and you've got to be, but they're also. Our kids move faster than we did anyways. I mean, they're on their devices and they get things quicker, and they're used to a faster paced world than we were anyway. So, I think they'll adapt pretty well.
You were saying you were invited to the Volkswagen assembly plant.
Uh-huh.
I remember reading that the very progressive Walter Reuther of the United Auto Workers was invited to GM's first highly automated robotic plant, and he asked them when he got done with the tour, how many of these robots are going to buy your product?
Right. Did you all hear that? Just Walter Reuther, the UAW leader, pointing out to GM after a tour of the factory and the robotics, how many of these robots are going to buy your product?
That was in the late 60s.
Yeah.
What year did you tour the...
It was 2009. Yeah. So it's yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering, given the paralysis of the Democratic Party and the divisiveness of the Republican Party, if you foresee a third party evolving.
Well, I started hinting at that. So there has been this talk of doing a kind of moderate party. I think a lot of people, it was Hickenlooper and John Kasich. There was a rumor of that. I actually just interviewed John Kasich on stage, who didn't want to talk about it. But they came out they very smartly leaked and then denied that they were doing a unity ticket. And that would be incredibly appealing to probably a lot of people, like people in this room, and myself and people like that. The question with all of that, because you've squeezed the centrists out of the Democratic Party. Keep in mind, again, as I said about Hillary Clinton, she was anti-free trade at the end. She was kind of going all Bernie on us. I like to think that she would, with TPP, she would have nipped and tucked and put it in the oven and let it bake and bring it out and call it a day. I think she probably would have changed on that. But I think there is this effort and a frustration. There's such a frustration in Washington among Republican moderates. I cannot tell you. It's just like, it's so frustrating. And not that the Trumps folks are conservative. They're populists. It's a totally different thing. I mean, it's really important for people to understand that Donald Trump did not include entitlement reform in his budget because they don't believe in entitlement reform, which was a classic free market conservative position. Democrats don't want entitlement reform. They want to just raise benefits, even though both of these programs are facing potential bankruptcy down the road. And so the Democrats have been taken over by the Bernie voices who say we should raise benefits and not worry about going bankrupt. So you've got you've got the sort of classic moderate Republican and Democrat with nowhere to go. So I think there's a place to go. It's just the third party thing, you don't necessarily have the numbers. Moderates aren't a big vociferous chunk of the population, believe it or not. Moderates aren't loud enough, you know. And the other thing is moderates don't vote. If you want to have an impact, I mean, they vote in general elections. In primary elections, only 17% of the electorate votes, and they tend to be activists on the left and activists on the right. And because most congressional districts are safe now, whoever gets nominated wins. So you have all of those seats, those congressional seats, basically coming from the hard left or the hard right. So I always say to moderate audiences, if you want to have an impact, get involved at the primary level. Get involved, make sure you've got a good primary candidate who wants to actually govern and isn't part of what I like to call the caveman coalition, which is, you know, when Ted Cruz was shutting down the government, you know, a lot of us labeled him part of the caveman coalition, which is, you know, you don't want to govern, you just want to, you know, shout and wave banners. But I agree that there is a sensibility, and these two parties are here, they feel like they've been around forever, but they haven't been around forever. Things can happen, and I do think something's going to happen in the Republican Party. I'm not sure what. I'm not smart enough to say.
One more question over.
Yes.
Hello. Larry Adito, class of 1969 with Dick Main, Lowell Tech. I have a conundrum for you.
Uh-oh.
It's almost like
Can I have a glass of wine first?
No, it's almost like a Bermuda Triangle. You talk about the unemployment rate, and you talk about the huge amount of people that have dropped out of the employment, or looking for employment. Yeah. You also talked about what's coming, and it's not. I have no idea how long it's going to take to implement all these driverless cars and Ubers and drones and everything else. And then lastly, we have the 12 million dreamers that I believe ultimately they'll be here to stay. To me, that is the biggest conundrum. I don't know what the answer is, and has anybody in Washington thought about this?
What's the conundrum?
The conundrum is that you know, I guess the unemployment rate today is, they say it's 4%.
Right, but a lot of people, but that's how many people, as you say, are looking for jobs,
Yeah,
not, doesn't
I believe it's
account for
probably
people who've
closer
dropped
to
out.
8 or 9%.
Yeah.
And now you have, you talked about 2 million long haul drivers.
Right, trucks.
How about local drivers? How about the UPS drivers that are going to be displaced? Then you have 12 million people that are in this country that are dreamers or that are illegal, and they're going to become legal in some fashion over the next,
Right.
let's say, 10, 15, 20 years. What are we going to do with all these people? And then we have all the baby boomers moving out. This is quite a question in my mind.
Well, I mean, you know, there's 6 million vacant jobs. You know, Fortune 500 companies complain, you know, these big companies are worried because baby boomers are retiring and they can't replace them. So, you know, there are jobs there. It's just that it's just the problem is, politically the problem is, and economically, the population of people who aren't necessarily skilled or educated for those jobs. Those jobs are going to become increasingly, the jobs that come online are going to require increasingly more knowledge, going back to your knowledge economy question, they require more knowledge, more understanding of technology, and more skills. And those are coming online, and so you have to worry about a population that has already been left behind by the automation that we've seen and the globalization we've seen. What happens to that population? And I think we have to really focus, and again, you guys, I think you've done it so well in this community. You've got to focus on bringing that population online economically. And you've got to look at an education system that serves them and gets them into jobs where they can make a living. Does that answer your conundrum? Okay. It was a good conundrum.
Hey, I think that's it for this evening for questions.
Thank you all. This has been, I love hearing your thoughts. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.